Newly released texts appear to show that Jeffrey Epstein influenced a lawmaker's questions during a 2019 hearing with Michael Cohen, who was testifying against his former boss, Donald Trump. The texts between Epstein and Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, were sent in Pacific time. At 7:41 that morning, Epstein texted Plaskett, "Are you chewing?" 1 minute later, she responded, "Not anymore." Minutes before Plaskett was set to question Cohen, Epstein texted. Cohen brought up Rona, keeper of the secrets, misspelling her first name. Plaskett responded, "Rona?" and then asked, "Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym?" Epstein replied, "That's his assistant." Minutes later, Plaskett asked Cohen about Trump's assistant.
Is Miss Rona, what is Miss Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot that went on.
Epstein texted again after Plaskett finished her questions. "Good work." After the Post published this report, Plaskett's office issued a statement that read in part, "During the hearing, Congresswoman Plaskett received texts from staff, constituents, and the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases partisan vitriol, including Epstein."
We cannot allow the times to divide us or allow ourselves to be marginalized or fractured like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, which would have us believe that we are.
Went on.
Epstein texted again after the read in part, "During the hearing, Congresswoman Plaskett received texts from staff, constituents, and the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases partisan vitriol, including Epstein."
We cannot allow the times to divide us or allow ourselves to be marginalized or fractured like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, which would have us believe that we are isolated in our history, our struggle, or in our collective power. Since its establishment in 1971,
How's everybody doing today? This is Attorney Antonio Moore. I wanted to come to you today to talk about how I feel that many, and I believe it might go to most, Black celebrities and Black politicians are largely compromised. We've talked about the wealth gap. We've talked about the lack of wealth. But what has happened is the expression of Black success is as though none of that happened because you have white wealth, you have white ecosystems propping up Black folks to make it look like we've achieved and we've arrived. We know about Barack Obama with the Citibank telling him about who he should appoint. We know about all the backdrop of Kamala not going after the mortgage lenders. But what we see is that as a result of what is going on, there is very little space for organic Black politics, let alone organic Black business, because your idea of success is to look at the outside of an M&M shell. You better cut it open, look at the inside, just like you see with Plaskett, and ask the question, how did we get here where someone who is a prop for Epstein has clear evidence that she's a prop for Epstein can sit here and talk to us about how American Descendants of Slavery is divisive? An organic Black political movement that came right from this couch, that came from Yvette Carnell's house, and y'all took it whole hog. I want to talk today because Black people, and particularly ADOS Black people, should be livid with the CBC, should be livid with her office, should be writing her office, should be demanding her censured. This is not because Republicans need her censured, because as I understand it, she don't even vote. It is on the back of the fact that this is a woman who 2 years after siding with, voicing for, taking money from, and being built by Epstein, stood in the way of your politics and your identity. I just want to talk. I just showed the video, and in that video, the released documents from Epstein's estate showed that he texted with Plaskett during a congressional hearing about Cohen regarding Trump, and he is telling her what to do. You have Plaskett come on the news, say, I take texts from all constituents. None of that adds up to the video I just showed you. For many of you, you might not have seen that video and might have taken her word at full value. But again, when you listen to the video, which is a minute long, you walk away with a very specific understanding. Let's play it again.
Like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants.
Newly released texts appear to show that Jeffrey Epstein influenced a lawmaker's questions during a 2019 hearing with Michael Cohen, who was testifying against his former boss, Donald Trump. The texts between Epstein and Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, were sent in Pacific time. At 7:41 that morning, Epstein texted Plaskett, "Are you chewing?" 1 minute later, she responded, "Not anymore." Minutes before Plaskett was set to question Cohen, Epstein texted. Cohen brought up Rona, keeper of the secrets, misspelling her first name. Plaskett responded, "Rona?" and then asked, "Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym?" Epstein replied, "That's his assistant." Minutes later, Plaskett asked Cohen about Trump's assistant.
Is Miss Rona, what is Miss Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot that went on.
Epstein texted again after Plaskett finished her questions. Good work. After the Post published this report, Plaskett's office issued a statement that read in part, "During the hearing, Congresswoman Plaskett received texts from staff, constituents, and the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases partisan vitriol, including Epstein."
We cannot allow the times to divide us or allow ourselves to be marginalized or fractured like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, which would have us believe that we are isolated in our history, our struggle, or in our collective power. Since its establishment in 1971, the Congressional Black Caucus has committed to using the full constitutional power, statutory authority, and financial resources of the federal government to address inequities in African American communities and other marginalized communities in the United States and globally.
What we have is a situation where we got bad information. How's everybody doing today? This is Tone Talks. We're having a discussion today. We're going to talk about this Plaskett stuff. And as I look at this, I want everybody to start here. Actually, let's start here. How Jeffrey Epstein helped a rising Democratic star pull off a political upset. So what I'm saying to you today is that our wealth level does not support the representation you're seeing of us on screens, in political environments, and it makes it utterly dang near impossible to motivate and move a Black population that should know that they're cut out. Now, in addition, you have the whole issue with we're ADOS, and then you have Caribbeans. While there is some alignment, and while we do look similar, our interests do not always align, and often we lack personal self-interest as a result of the setup of this entire situation. So basically, you look at Plaskett, and she takes money from Epstein. She stands up for Epstein. As I understand it, the island they're talking about is in her district. And to understand it, you got to understand this. Jeffrey Epstein's companies got at least $300 million in tax breaks from the U.S. Virgin Islands, while Democrat Stacey Plaskett was general counsel at the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority. Stop me if you know this already. I know for a lot of you guys, all you know is what they're saying on TV, and now they're allowing her to do a media cycle where she does not deal with the video I just represented to you. She is talking about her constituents, and he was one of the constituents. What she is not dealing with is how he was. Don't she represent the Virgin Islands? Okay, because he had the Epstein Island in her area. From 2007 to 2014, Stacey Plaskett served as general counsel for the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority. Let me make this bigger so everybody can see it. Which oversees tax incentive programs for businesses in the territory. The EDA is the body that granted very large tax breaks to Jeffrey Epstein's companies. It is sounding like she is integral to his creation of an ecosystem that allowed for that island to exist. This is not a constituent. He is texting her live while she is questioning Cohen, who is tied to Trump, on the Senate. On the floor of the House. EDA is the body that granted very large tax breaks to Jeffrey Epstein's companies, especially Southern Trust Company, which reportedly cut his effective tax bills in the islands by as much as 90%. So during the period Epstein was getting special tax incentives, Plaskett was the agency's lawyer, not a random bystander, the EDA in the Virgin Islands. Court filings and investigative reporting say Epstein had a quid pro quo relationship with top USVI, United States Virgin Island officials, and that his companies received around $300 million in tax incentives from the territory. Local coverage and political opponents have emphasized that his tax incentives program ran through the EDA, where Plaskett was general counsel. There is no way that an ADOS black person that has any political black backbone should not think that this was not a setup, that she was not here to destroy your politics, and that she did not play an integral role in keeping Epstein in power, and thus supporting who? Trump as well. No document has yet surfaced that shows Plaskett personally drafted Epstein's specific incentive packages, lobbied in turn to approve it, or signed a special deal just for him. Most decisions on incentives are made by the EDA board and senior economic development officials, not by the lawyer alone. One filing in the related J.P. Morgan United States Virgin Island case even stresses that. Text message revealed Jeffrey Epstein was coaching Plaskett during a congressional hearing in February 2019. Let's all be clear. To coach someone, you must have what? Their personal message. To ask them to stop chewing gums, you must have what? A very personal relationship with them. For them then to stop chewing the gum, it means what? That they don't only respect you, that they revere you. Can we talk about it today? I want to have the discussion. 310-388-349 if you want to call in. I'm just going to keep you short, not too long. We set it all up and we are having this discussion. But it's not just about Plaskett. We're going to talk a little bit about Nicki Minaj and speaking for Trump at the UN on Christian Nigerians or something of the sort. We're going to talk a little bit about LeBron James and the gambling a little bit at the end. But it is my assessment and viewpoint that black achievement has now become a prop to allow white people not to give black folks any achievement. So you basically undergird a broken version of black achievement. You undergird a version of black achievement where this Congress member is there, but they can be texted by the white Capitol, and the white Capitol tell them what to say. Where you have this rapper who music is debauchery, and she's gonna go and talk because Trump and on the UN. Then you got the basketball player, and he's supposed to be worth billions, but all of a sudden his retirement is about Hennessy. He's selling the sports gambling while he's actively playing. Nobody asking any questions about how do you sell the sports gambling while you're playing. Oh, just because you're talking about football in the commercials, that don't make no sense. We gonna clear it up today. I'm just saying to you, in short, this woman not only was supporting Epstein, she was undercutting the ability for myself, for Yvette Carnell, for the ADOS Foundation to do any politics for you and your family. You should be livid today, not just watching in the news, but being part of it responsibly, of course, but being part of the news and demanding answers for who sent you to shut down ADOS. Who sent you to shut down ADOS?
And the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases partisan vitriol, including Epstein.
We cannot allow the times to divide us or allow ourselves to be marginalized or fractured like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, which would have us believe that we are isolated.
So while she is attacking ADOS, she is in line, in control by Epstein to the point where he can tell her to stop chewing gum. Okay. We see that our politicians, as Yvette said, don't work for us. That's the problem in a nutshell. We got Mayor Eric Adams. He at the Western Wall with the outfit on. We got Stacey Plaskett, and she's representing the U.S. Virgin Islands and texting she didn't even know what she was saying. If you listen to the words, and you can go back and play the video earlier, she didn't even know the question she was asking. She was just repeating what he was telling her to say. And if she's doing that at the congressional hearing, how much of her career is nothing more than a repetition of his capital versus the politics of the Virgin Islands? I'm just talking to you today. We're going to keep it short. We're going to keep it short. Yeah. We see it with Jeffries. We see it with Booker. We see it with all the politicians. Where are they our politicians? Do we have the wealth to have a ADOS black senator, let alone president, anchored in ADOS politics as their central goal? And do we even have a version of ADOS politics? What we found out with the foundation and with the movement is that we can't even get a category, because you're going to have black orgs come out and say, we don't need a category for ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. Meaning the census, when you see the census, we don't even have numbers on the failure of American Descendants of Slavery. And we start to ask the question, why don't we have a category? Is it Plaskett and people like her? Caribbean American Heritage Month is about the contribution of Americans of Caribbean heritage. Wait, but when she said what we was doing, just in recognizing that ADOS are a separate group, we are divisive. That's what she was saying. Okay. I just 310-388-3499. I understand if people are at work. I want everybody to understand how deep her relationships were with Epstein. Maximum amounts allowed. How Jeffrey Epstein's political donations won him and his island a powerful ally. Court filings show what the court filings show. How Jeffrey Epstein exerted power in the U.S. Virgin Islands, two of which he owned. He generously donated to local politicians, including now Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. His consigliere was the island's first lady, who helped him weigh in on a law record show. It was 2018, and Rep. Stacey Plaskett was running for re-election in Congress. She expected to win the third term easily, running unopposed in both the Democratic primary and general election. A financier worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Epstein owned 2 islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands. His main residence on the island of Little St. James was lavishly furnished in the style of a resort. He had even shipped in more sand and palm trees to make it look exactly as he desired. Plaskett wanted to persuade Epstein to donate $30,000, the maximum amount an individual could donate, to a national campaign committee at the time. There was just one issue for Plaskett. Epstein was a convicted offender, having pled guilty 11 years earlier to soliciting. Law enforcement has separately concluded he abused scores of girls. So you have him already as a known convict, and she's still soliciting money from him. The U.S. Virgin Islands, where Plaskett is from, doesn't have normal congressional representation like D.C. and Puerto Rico. It has a non-voting delegate. So there was no reason for the Democrats to save her in terms of the vote. So why did they save her? I wonder if other folks are tied either ancillary, tangentially to Epstein through other, because it's not just Epstein. There's probably more people than just Epstein. He's just the famous one. If you remember, they had the documentary on Netflix. But is this an ecosystem of debauchery? Like Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, it was a non-voting delegate. She can serve on committees, but doesn't have any say when the full House of Representatives votes on the bill. One part of her job, however, is the same as that of every Democrat in Congress. She is expected to fundraise for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That year's campaign cycle, the committee gave her a target of around $250,000 to raise for the organization, which recruits and supports candidates for the party, she said in her deposition. And she went to Epstein to get her piece. a big chunk of it at least. Can you give me 30,000, 40,000? I want everybody just to understand the gravity of this whole situation and slow things down. I don't want to give you too much to think about, but I just want you to understand how awful this is. And you cannot understand how awful this is without understanding the video that I played. You cannot understand.
Newly released texts appear to show that Jeffrey Epstein influenced a lawmaker's questions during a 2019 hearing with Michael Cohen, who was testifying against his former boss, Donald Trump. The texts between Epstein and Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, were sent in Pacific time. At 7:41 that morning, Epstein texted Plaskett, "Are you chewing?" 1 minute later, she responded, "Not anymore." Minutes before Plaskett was set to
Are you chewing? Not anymore. That is a thing that you say to your 14-year-old daughter, to your 8-year-old son that's doing a speech at the school. That is not a message that a grown person says to another grown person unless they have a relationship built on power. And what you get is him telling her why she's there. She is there to enact his politics, not her own and not Adolf's politics.
question Cohen. Epstein texted. Cohen brought up Rona, keeper of the secrets, misspelling her first name. Plaskett responded, "Rona?" and then asked, "Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym?" Epstein replied, "That's his assistant." Minutes later, Plaskett asked Cohen about Trump's assistant.
Is Miss Rona, what is Miss Rona's position?
Rona Graff is the Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot that went on.
Epstein texted again after Plaskett finished her questions. "Good work." After the Post published this report, Plaskett's office issued a statement that read in part, "During the hearing, Congresswoman Plaskett received texts from staff, constituents, and the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases partisan vitriol, including Epstein."
We cannot allow the times to divide us or allow ourselves to be marginalized or fractured like groups such as ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, which would have us believe that we are isolated in our history, our struggle, or in our collective power. Since its establishment in 19...
So now you see what we were saying and trying to tell the New York Times, the Washington Post, the ABCs of the world, the BuzzFeed, and that no one wanted to deal with about the issues with the attacks that were coming to the American Descendant Slavery movement that were almost always built on lies, because I don't even know a Russian, but y'all Russian bots. Can we talk today? So, and for those people that might wonder, is that her? Just look at the dot on the video. You see the dot.
1971, the Congressional Black Caucus.
Same woman. It's the exact same woman. The birthmark shows you it's the same woman. Just to make sure that nobody has any questions on whether that is the woman in Plaskett. I also wanted to briefly touch this as well. How many people in the chat know about Nicki Minaj at the UN? As I understand it, she's not well educated, and she's at the UN talking about Christian Nigerians. In the chat, have you got a chance to see her speak at the UN? Nicki Minaj is set to speak at the United Nations on behalf of the Trump administration. Well, this is a collab nobody saw coming. Nicki Minaj is partnering with the Trump administration to address the United Nations. The Anaconda... Woo, come on, American lady. You can support the channel, tonetalks.net, share this video, subscribe. The Anaconda rapper will reportedly join the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, to deliver remarks Tuesday in New York City, spotlighting the violence committed against Christians in Nigeria. So she gonna speak to the Christians in Nigeria. Okay. Well, Nicki Minaj be knowing stuff. Maybe she says something intelligent. Let's listen to her.
I'd like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue. I would like to thank.
I want everybody to understand when speaking, words are important. For those people that are standing on, well, she wasn't there for Trump. When you start off with that level of appreciation and thanks, you're speaking for Trump.
President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural.
She ain't even speaking. She just well, you could have just released this paper. Do you see the paper in her hand, everybody? I don't need her to read. I need her to speak.
And calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural right to freedom of religion or belief.
Have you listened to Nicki Minaj's music? We talking about Christianity. All right. I ain't going to even get into that today. But what I will go to is a Rolling Stone article that faith is under attack. Nicki Minaj spreads misleading information at the United Nations. Nicki's claim of extremism against Nigerian Christians like Trump's aren't backed by any data. Okay. So who told her, who made her the spokesperson, the rapper that raps about sex and debauchery, the spokesperson for this message, and then she go down there and she gonna thank Trump in the middle of a moment where Trump is cutting food stamps possibly to people that listen to her music. God dang. So the people listening to your music have used their last to support your concert and your CDs, and you gonna thank Trump for letting you speak at the UN on something that you don't even understand. Nations headquarters today calling out what she perceives at the United Nations headquarters today, calling out what she perceives as extremism against Christians in Nigeria. I would like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage and calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria. She said, also asserted in her 4-minute speech, who sent you, Nikki? That should be the question that ADOS, that Black Americans at large, that Black folks have across this world. Who sent you? When you start to talk about stuff that don't seem like you understand what you're talking about. Faith is under attack. Nicki Minaj spreads misleading information at the UN. Before Minaj's speech, UN Ambassador Mike Waltz echoed the notion of persecution against Christians before thanking Nicki for taking the UN podium to demand action for Christians. Minaj's speech prefaced a panel discussion entitled Combating Religious Violence and the Killing of Christians in Nigeria. So we in a moment where food stamps is being cut, and you ain't did no speech on food stamps being cut for the people that support your music and have made you a star in the music industry, but you got time to support this wildness. I'm not here to talk about Christians in Nigeria. I'm not here to talk about Epstein Island and what happened on the island. I'm here today to ask you, is there any Black success independent of being propped up by white capital? Or are what we're seeing is a mechanism of the decadent veil where they are veiling you with the presentation of arrival and achievement so that you don't do no politics. And I'll tell you, as somebody who do politics, that's what's going on. So we got the House of Rep person that isn't a House of Rep person. We got the rapper, and understand she's from the Virgin Islands. Nicki Minaj is Trinidadian. Okay. And they just speaking about stuff that they don't understand. The lady asked the question on the congressional panel, and she didn't even know the name of the person she was going to use and made it part of her statement, Rona. She didn't know who Rona was. Plaskett didn't know. I played it for you multiple times. You got Nicki Minaj talking about this subject, but if you catch her at night and try to dig into the subject, 9 times out of 10, she won't be able to tell you about the subject of Nigerians and Christianity. But she down there reading from a paper.
leaf.
She down there reading from a paper.
I would like to thank President
At
Trump
first, it looked like she talked.
for
Who wrote that
prioritizing this
paper?
issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop.
Who put this lady on this stage? That should be your question. We come to LeBron James, and I tie him in because, you know, he came out with the Hennessy retirement number 2 or something like that. The announcement number 2, we thought he was talking about retirement, and he gonna announce a Hennessy. Who told you that the alcohol sales are down, and we need you to come out and prop up the alcohol sales, get these young black folks, the young black men buying this alcohol again? You got LeBron James announcing his DraftKings partnership, I believe, last year, and somehow he able to do commercials. So we putting all the players are under investigation for gambling. Okay, they should be. If you gamble while you playing, but how is that player? And I don't know if you guys have noticed this. He's the only active player that is doing commercials for gambling, to my knowledge, while he's playing. And the only boundary that they're using is he's doing the commercials for the football games and not for the basketball games. And there is no way that an active player, especially an active player with the presence of LeBron James, should be allowed to do a gambling commercial. But by some right, they are making and propping him into that position because they know of the value they poured into him that they can extract through the wallets of all these poor ADOS black men, and ain't nobody saying nothing but tone. Who put you there? Who sent you? Who propped you up? You got players going to prison, going to jail, losing livelihoods for getting involved with gambling, rightfully so, while the player they look up to is selling it. And ain't nobody said nothing in the news. Nobody said nothing about how is LeBron James selling gambling and playing the sports right now. There's now a campaign to cover up the Plaskett. We're going to have her go around and say that he was one of the constituents. I wanted to play the video for you today to have you understand how ignorant it is given the actual testimony and how it lines up with the text message to make that argument. There is no way that this woman should not have been censored. There's no way that this woman should still be in Congress. And there's no way that she should have been allowed to speak on the American descendant of slavery movement without a loud response from American descendant of slavery people. Today, I just come to you to have a discussion and ask the question, do we even have black success in America, or is it all just a prop? It's looking more and more like it's a prop. This is Tone Talks. Please go to tonetoss.net, subscribe, donate, share.